Good afternoon, everybody, and a really warm welcome to Kirklees Council's Children's Scrutiny Panel on Thursday, the 1st of October at 2 p.m. Just a reminder to anybody who's participating in the meeting that this meeting is videoed for archive purposes. So, a really warm welcome. Just going to quickly introduce the members of the panel. Officers who are participating in the meeting will introduce themselves when the report they're introducing come forward. So I'm Andrew Marchington, I'm a Kirklees councillor and I'm chair of the Children's Scrutiny Panel. Amanda?
Amanda Pinnock, I'm a Kirklees councillor.
Yusra?
My name is just Councillor Yusra Hussain, I'm from Batley West Ward.
Yeah, Paul White.
Hello, I'm Paul White. I'm a councillor for Home Valley North, Kirklees councillor.
Richard.
Hi, panel member and Kirkburton Ward councillor. And
Paul Davis.
Hello, yeah, Councillor Paul Davis. I'm Kirklees councillor for Home Valley South.
Yeah. And just say a really warm welcome to Yusra, your first meeting in the Children's Scrutiny Panel. It's really good to see you here. And I just want to say a big thank you to Councillor Arfat Buck, who's been a member of this panel since the beginning of the last municipal year. And thank you for the contributions that he's made to this panel. I think we have got three co-optees, Tony Bromley, Dale O'Neill and Linda Summers. I know we've had apologies from Linda this afternoon, and I think there might be some technical issues about other panel members joining us during the meeting. So if Tony and Dale join us during the rest of the afternoon, we'll introduce them as and when, but thank you for that. So that's membership of the committee. So we're on to item 2 now, page 1 of our minutes of the previous meeting. Can somebody propose, though, there seemed to be an accurate record of that meeting? Yeah, okay with that, panel members?
Yeah, I'll propose,
yeah. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, I think we're happy with that. Thank you, Lee, for those minutes. And I think any matters arising will pick up either outside the meeting or during the meeting itself. Panel members, have you got any interests on any item to declare on any item this afternoon? No, that's fine. No. Thank you. Item 4, all items, this is a meeting in public. All meeting items are held in public unless there's a reason to go into private session, and all items this afternoon will be held in public. Item 5, we've received no indication of any public deputations or petitions, and no members of the public have indicated they wish to ask questions this afternoon, which is item 6. So we're straight into item 7 on our report, which are the preparations undertaken for the reopening of our schools in September. And I think, Joanne, you're going to be leading us on that. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. I'm Joanne Sanders. I'm Service Director for Learning and Early Support here at Kirklees Council. And I was really keen to share with you the preparations that were undertaken leading up towards the wider reopening of schools. Obviously, schools didn't actually close; they remained open for youngsters who were vulnerable and those of key workers. But actually, there was a full reopening where all year groups were to be welcomed back from the new academic year, which for Kirklees was from week commencing the 7th of September. So I'm sure that scrutiny panel were keen to understand how we've continued to work in partnership with our schools and learning settings to make sure that they could have a successful reopening, and how we could together work with our parents and families to welcome youngsters back to school. There's been ongoing conversations with our schools and settings all the way through the summer term, and absolutely this continued during the summer holiday period. That was all building upon the work of our Education and Learning Partnership Board. Just to explain to colleagues who might not know, the Education and Learning Partnership Board is a representative group for across the education sector, and it's made up of head teachers, governors, trade union colleagues, and it's chaired by Councillor Carol Patterson, who is our lead member for schools and aspiration and communities. And they have been a key focus holding that work together ever since we found ourselves in the pandemic. So during the summer holidays, it was really important that schools were enabled to have a break, but also at the same time making preparations for that safe return back in September. And it was really important that as a council and the support that the council offers, that we continue to meet as part of our wider business continuity planning to make sure that schools had the support that they needed, particularly at a time when the Department for Education was updating guidance in support of that return. So those dialogues continued. In addition, we pulled together 3 very focused workshops, because obviously across the summer holiday period there were some activities being undertaken that youngsters could participate in both physically and remotely, and so we were keen to make sure that we had oversight of those activities and any things that might have been emerging with new guidance. And so we had three workshops to consider a whole host of matters. They included things like the physical space. As we know, all our school buildings are very different. Some are big, some are small, some are older buildings, some are newer buildings. And we needed to make sure that we'd taken advice and given support to enable schools to consider the arrangements that they would need to have in place in line with DFE guidance. And that included things like making sure that youngsters could benefit from school meals and that the physical environment would be clean. Very much a focus on welfare support. Obviously, the government had a scheme of issuing vouchers for youngsters that were entitled to free school meals, and those were extended over the summer holiday period. But we were making sure as well throughout the summer holiday period that those families who became eligible were offered the right support over that summer holiday period. Obviously, a focus on transport, but youngsters being able to travel safely to school was something that was at the forefront of everybody's minds over the summer holiday. And we wanted to really have that focus on inclusion, making sure that people, our youngsters with special educational needs or additional needs, were fully in focus in terms of all of our planning. Key, I think it's been a key theme. We've spoken about it before at Scrutiny, building and maintaining parental confidence, having a real weathered eye on the mental health and well-being of our youngsters and our school staff who had been away from each other for a number of months, having a real focus and putting some support and resources and making those available to our schools was another key theme. We were able to use some funding that the government gave all local authorities and build upon some of the excellent work that our educational psychology and public health colleagues had begun to do some work upon. We obviously the emerging advice around public health and infection prevention control, making sure that guidance and processes were in place and available for schools to utilise as they went back, and having a real think about the necessary digital, the home learning, the blended learning approach, making sure that there were systems in place to be able to support youngsters in the event that they needed to be at home because they needed to self-isolate, for example. And obviously over that period, just to point out, obviously there was emerging guidance in relation to face coverings, personal protective equipment, risk assessments, and we were making sure that all our systems and the advice to schools was up to date and reflective of guidance as it was reissued. So we were working with emergency planning colleagues, and what we wanted to do was do some scenario planning, so that we could think through some of the potential situations that might arise as schools went back, and that was a really helpful workshop, and we undertook that exercise with a group of our head teachers as well as some of our council staff, and we did that prior to the start of term, and it really helped refine some of that work that we'd done over the summer. What we then did, our Kirklees learning partners and our HR partners undertook an exercise where we wanted to contact all our schools just in advance of them going back to make sure that they felt confident, there were no barriers to reopening, and we repeated that exercise the first week of term, because planning is planning. Actually, when you invite youngsters back in and you are actually living that, we wanted to double check that there were no emerging issues that we needed to be on the front foot with. I think it was what I would say is we had a hugely positive start to the beginning of term. The engagement that we do regularly with our school heads, teachers, our multi-academy trust chief executives, overwhelmingly the feedback had been it was brilliant that the children were back in. We were really pleased about the levels of attendance. They've been hugely positive. It's something that we're monitoring really closely, but we're really proud of the levels of attendance. And we've been really keen to support and build upon that positive return, retain that confidence. And we did have a communication approach, which was saying back together, better together. It was very much to instill and build upon that confidence. After being out of education for some youngsters for 6 months plus, it might feel a bit different, but nonetheless, it's brilliant that youngsters are back in and learning. So obviously, it's been hugely positive. That said, as you might imagine, given the scale of the pandemic, like this is happening across the country, and it's certainly happening in Kirklees, there are some instances where youngsters are having to self-isolate or bubbles, and that's not a universal one-size-fits-all approach to how we're managing that return to education. It does mean that some youngsters are having to spend some time at home, but we've put advice, support, that's been readily available to our schools. We've got excellent feedback from the work that our infection prevention control colleagues and our emergency planning colleagues are able to give, so that we are minimising the impact, but doing that in a very safe way. There's been lots of learning that's emerged over the last 3 weeks, and what it's really shown is that it's been a real partnership with schools and education settings, not just between the school and the schools and the council, but between schools as well. And yeah, I think that preparation has set us in as good a stead as we possibly could for the beginning of term.
You're on mute, Andrew.
Excellent. Yeah, one day I'll get it right. So thank you, Joanne, for that report on that. Right, panel members, just opening it up for questions on specific areas of this. So Richard, you got a question for Joanne on that?
Thank you. Yeah, just briefly before I ask a question, I'd like to say I think that your summary of the report was very positive, and as I'm probably in a unique position in some ways, because I'm a parent. I also sit on this panel and the Children's Scrutiny and the Corporate Parenting Board. So I see it from all different angles, and I've seen some of the stuff you referred to filtering down through my own school I interact with, and I think from the start of the pandemic in March time, the improvement's been massive, and I think the involvement of Kirklees has been extremely positive. I've seen quite a few challenging areas, and the responsiveness from officers right from the very top has been excellent. So I have one question, and it's very specific, and it's on the back of a contact with a resident I had the other day, and I'll read it out to you. And it's what measures are being taken to ensure that children who are forced to isolate are not disadvantaged, and in particular, when a whole bubble is not isolated, I'm particularly concerned that these students are not disadvantaged against their peers. So that's a really specific area, because I think there are plans in place to manage bubbles, but I think that if just one or two students within a bubble are being forced to isolate, I'm a little bit worried that maybe some of the schools are not addressing this area as well as they could. So just what is Kirklees able to do to assist with this, please?
Joanne.
Thank you. So I think there's been a recognition from central government about, I suppose, all youngsters, but and there has been some funding that the government has given to schools. There's £80 per mainstream pupil for youngsters from the reception year right through to year 11, and that money is going to be received by schools in 3 waves. There's an additional amount of money for youngsters in special schools and pros. I think absolutely there's a key focus, and it isn't a one size fits all around a remote or blended learning offer, and some of that is age specific. It might be very different for a youngster who's in year 10 to a youngster who's in reception year, but you're absolutely right, no youngster ought to be disadvantaged. Just actually this week, I think the Department for Education recognised that this is a huge challenge for youngsters and for schools, and what they've done is to put on some webinars and make resources available for schools to share good practice about how they might undertake remote or blended learning. And I think we need to also work with our schools to partner them up, bring them together so that they can share best practice and actually share some of the resources so that youngsters are able to benefit. I think it is something that our Kirklees school improvement team will wish to coordinate, and we need to do that quickly. The conversations that I spoke about earlier, we'd had individual conversations with our schools. One of the questions that we've been asking and seeking to understand is the measures in place for remote learning. We need to monitor it from a data point of view, and we need to make sure as well that people are utilising some of the resources that are available regionally through our teaching schools. So I think there's an awful lot of support out there, and it is very much about how do we monitor individual youngsters, which I think schools do monitor individual youngsters' progress as part of the course anyway, but it is something that we need to focus on, and I'm sure will be a feature of a forthcoming partnership board.
Thank you, Joanne. Richard, do you want to follow that up? Is that sufficient? Is that
just really briefly? I think you've said all the right things. I think just a little bit of a concern that, how can I put it? Kirklees has a unique position in this, that they can push out messages to schools, and I think a message about that particular point, how they interact with schools, how they interact with individual pupils who are forced to isolate, would be welcome. That's fine.
Yeah. Thanks,
so
Richard.
If I can just reassure you, we are in regular contact with our schools, and actually just last week we've done a series of school webinars. Last week we held another school webinar, and so absolutely we want to engage with schools around this issue, amongst others. Also, when schools are contacting us for advice and support in the event that they've got the need for pupils to isolate, one of the questions that we're asking is about the arrangements that they have in place for remote or blended learning. And so this is a key area of focus, and I think that's reflected in the report. But yes, you're right, it's something we absolutely need to coordinate and keep an oversight on.
Yeah, thank you, Joanne.
Thank you.
And I think part of our remit of looking about educational outcomes for children over the longer term, we need to keep, again, an eye on how COVID and lockdown and has had an impact down to the level of individual pupils. So we need to keep a watching brief on that. That's really important. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Paul Davis, I think you got a question you'd indicated you want to ask a question.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Well, first, a comment. As Joanne knows, I'm a member of the Education Learning Partnership Board, so we've spoken about these issues many times. And at our last board, as Joanne said, some really positive feedback from heads and business managers about what's been happening in schools. And certainly as a school governor, I know in our school, certainly the return to school has indeed been very positive, and it's very clear that children are very pleased to be back in school. I think that the issue, and this seemed to be a common issue in the board meeting when we were discussing this matter, was one of parents rather than children, and it was trying to get the parents to behave and to social distance, whereas the children absolutely are very well disciplined right across all the schools that we were talking about. But anyway, that's by the by as such, and I know that's improved as well. But following on from Councillor Smith, really, and this issue of very important issue of ensuring that children don't lose out, that we find ways of filling gaps if they do have to be sent home. I'd be interested in hearing, Joanne, a little bit more about the ideas around the tuition, the extra support for tuition that the government have flagged up, and not just the money they provide in, but what we think in Kirklees is the best way forward in that, and how we could use that to help fill some of these gaps. And also, if you may not have this with you at the moment, but also if you've got any statistics on schools where we've number of children that had to go home, bubbles, etc. As I said, I appreciate you may not have that now, but if you have some information on that, would be useful as well. Thank you.
Okay, so there are two aspects to the sort of government support, and you're right, it's not just about money. So the catch-up funding, which goes direct to schools, will be for them to use as they see fit. I think much of the conversation that we've had with schools will be about supporting interventions that are pupil-led. So actually, for the vast majority of that funding, probably will go on expertise, so staff time. Staffing is an issue. Just in the same respect as young people having to isolate, teachers having to isolate as well. So very much it's about understanding the youngsters within the school and what their needs are, so they'll be able to target the most appropriate interventions. There's something about getting back into good routines first and foremost, which I know our school heads have shared with us. The other aspect of support has been the national national tutoring programme, and that this is not something that the government have given money to schools for. This is a programme that's to be rolled out and has been done so with the Education Endowment Foundation. The Education Endowment Foundation use evidence-based or research-based interventions, and there's a wealth of resource that actually schools use all the time anyway, but the ability to be able to access tutors will be something that our schools and will be able to undertake with their youngsters. I think some of the detail is still emerging around that. So I think we're all, there was an aspect of let's get back and then let's understand where our youngsters are and how best we support them to achieve at the levels that they ought to be achieving at.
Paul, do you want to?
Sorry, just in terms of your other question, in terms of statistics, you're right, Councillor Davis. I'm really sorry, I don't have those to hand, but absolutely, that we'd be happy to share the picture of the last. I think we're getting towards the end of week 4, so we can help people understand where we're at in terms of bubbles aren't it's not one size fits all, but what I can share with you is that the proportion of youngsters that are at home and self-isolating, I think we had a look at this the middle of last week. There's around about 1.5% of the total school cohort. And that's if we looked from reception right the way through to year 13, so including post 16, that were, as at last week, had to spend some time being taught, being educated from home because of COVID. So relatively speaking, I think that is that's not a. Obviously, we want every child to be in school if they're able to attend school and want to attend school, but those figures were not out of kilter with neighbouring local authorities or nationally. In fact, I've just had a call with the DFE who said that our attendance figures in Kirklees are pretty positive and amongst some of the best in the region, which I think is testament to our families, parents, and our schools. So the statistics we can bring to the next scrutiny meeting or send those on, make those available.
Thanks very much, Joanne. And it's reassuring to hear that they're only 1.3% at home, and I think that's a good indicator of where we are. So, but it would be very good to see. I think for the committee to see that information. It's a shame that we're still waiting for details on the tuition, because really, I would have hoped that we'd get those through before now, but that's clearly not in your hands as such to change. So but thank you very much for that update. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Joanne. Yeah, it'd be good to see particularly the figures and to see both those elements coming back to committee at some stage. Yeah, thanks. Paul White.
Hi, Joanne.
You raised your hand for a question.
Yes, I've got a question, but I also wanted to echo some of the comments from Richard, Councillor Smith and Councillor Davis, because as a chair of governors, I've been monitoring what's been going on during the summer and so on and so forth. And as we spoke at a previous scrutiny, it felt very chaotic back in May when we were looking at returning, children returning to school in terms of the messaging and the communication. And maybe some of that was because it was just coming from all different directions. But I just want to say the communication during the summer has been excellent. And that's the feedback that I'm getting from the school. And that has definitely helped the school in terms of dealing with one of the key issues that we as a panel had, which was about parental anxiety as much as anything. We can't get children back in school unless the parents are confident to bring the children into school. And that worked very well in terms of the instances that I've got, the example of our school. So we only had 4 children not attending at the first day of school that were supposed to be in school. And out of 400, that's just, was beyond our expectation. And I know a lot of that was due to the excellent communication that was going on from the school, but the support that they had from Kirklees. So I just wanted to sort of congratulate you on that, because I think that clearly was done very well. part of the question, you've answered some of the things that I wanted to just touch on, actually, about statistics and so on and so forth. But there seemed to be a mixed picture through Kirklees from what I was picking up in terms of the percentage of pupils returning. So some schools were clearly not as good as others. And I just wondered whether you'd picked up any learning as to where perhaps in other parts of the borough or other schools, there may have been issues in terms of the numbers of children coming back. So it might be something you can report on later, I don't know. But the other issue that we were concerned at was the sort of digital support at home. So we've touched on that as well in terms of the other questions. And I know that schools are doing an awful lot of work to make sure that remote learning is available for all pupils at all times. And it's putting a huge pressure on the school and in particular the teachers. So I have a question really about welfare of teachers, because what I'm seeing in schools and the school that I'm in is that teachers are absolutely knackered because they're having to double up the work almost, and it is very challenging for them in school. There's a lot of pressure on them to be there in the class all the time and so on and so forth. So it's really about the bigger picture of support to schools to help them deal with that, and you've also touched on that, but I think it's just a really important area, and actually making sure that children do have the digital support at home, that they've got the right kit, and because there's certainly been a mixed picture in the school that we've had, and we've been wondering about ways of dealing with it or other pots of money we can perhaps go to for buying stuff, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a mixed bag of issues, but
right. Just before you answer that, can I bring Amanda in, because I know Amanda has asked previously about digital inclusion, so perhaps we can split those two questions. So if Amanda asks her question, and we can look about the digital side of things and then support to staff. So I can bring you in, Amanda, please.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep, lovely. Yeah, so really my question was around, plugging the gaps and access to education, as two of my colleagues have alluded to. And I have raised the issue about digital inclusion, obviously children being excluded from education because they don't have access to the information and communication technology. As a counsellor in my ward, where we have a lot of socio-economic issues, that is a real issue for us, and as counsellors we are still receiving requests from parents about access to laptops, access to the internet, so their children can learn at home when they can't go to school, and for various reasons. So I wanted to ask specifically about that. And also there was a period where there was a number of laptops available for schools. I think it was for year 10, and I believe the cohort of laptops have now been delivered, and there was talk about other laptops being delivered. So I'll be interested to know, or I'll be interested to have an update on that. And the other thing, which we haven't really covered, and I'm not sure, Joanne, whether this is part of your remit, but I'm also interested to know about colleges and universities. You talked a lot about school, and I understand the importance of school, but colleges and universities, they're different in a lot of ways. It may not be for the meeting today, but I'd definitely be interested to have an update as to how the council are working with those institutes and what sort of feedback you're receiving in respect of that.
Yeah, fine. Thanks, Amanda. So, Joanne, can we do the digital inclusion question first, and laptops and the equipment, and then we'll come back to Paul's question about support to staff. So if we do the digital first, yeah.
Okay, so just if I could take you back a little bit, you're absolutely right, Councillor Pinnock, in terms of the government did make with both devices and connectivity. They were very much targeted to specific groups of youngsters. This was way back last academic year. They were targeted at year 10s, absolutely, but also youngsters that were classed as vulnerable or were under the care of a social worker. What happened there was the council received an allocation for our maintained schools for the year 10s, but for all the youngsters that were, I suppose, had a social worker, and that could have been because they were a looked after child, for example, or they were on a child in need plan. We received a total allocation of just under 1,400 devices, and we also had a number, not quite the same number, of wireless routers. And we worked really closely, both myself and Elaine and Tom, to identify the youngsters, A, that were eligible, but B, that they could have the benefit of these devices as soon as was practically possible. As a bit of an added bonus, I suppose, our youngsters who are looked after children, who are known to our virtual school, we actually already support those youngsters with making sure that they've got access to devices, and it's different for different age youngsters. You know, I'm not sure how useful a laptop is for a 3-year-old, but I'm not a digital expert, and it's a long time since I had a 3-year-old in my household. So Elaine would say, for example, there was some youngsters that attend some of our special schools where actually it ain't a laptop that they needed an iPad, and so we were very much looking at meeting the needs of the youngsters. So I'm really proud of the fact that our teams worked incredibly diligently to identify the youngsters who were eligible. As a council, we were able to be more robust than that original allocation, and those devices, no sooner had they hit the council's possession than they were out to those youngsters, so without delay. So that was something that we felt very passionate about, and that also built on some work that Tom had been doing with our foster carer network, where there'd already been a commitment to work with the foster carers to make sure they had access to devices where they were needed. You are right in there has been a bit of an addition then to that programme from the DFE. We, as a result, have had an allocation or are about to receive an allocation of up to 300 more devices, and that is to support some youngsters who were on the shielding list, but also some youngsters who may need access to a device because they're having to self-isolate or etc. We, as fast as we are receiving them, they are, like I say, back out of the door and getting to the youngsters that need them. But what we quickly realised was exactly the points that you've been made. There is an inclusion issue here. It's not just about the kit, it is about the ability to access the internet, and there's all sorts of challenges, and actually we pulled together a strategic group of colleagues and partners around this very issue. And this is right the way through from the earliest years through to actually post-16 and adult learners, because some of our adult learners, we put an adult learning offer online as well. And it's not true to say that everybody's got either a brilliant connection because of where they live, or that they, like maybe you and I, have access to a lovely Wi-Fi hub that costs a monthly amount of money. We know that there's some real challenges around that. So we have got a strategic group. There is a proposal being worked on at this moment in time, and what we wanted to do is work very closely with our schools and education settings, because they also have bolstered the ability for youngsters to have access to devices, using some school kits to help people learn at home when, you know, if they knew that families didn't have access to laptops. The other thing that we've done as a council is we are clarify youngsters whose household income might have been significantly impacted upon because of the COVID situation, so through welfare support, and some of the things we've been doing, and we try to do that with our communication campaign was to signpost parents and our schools to signpost parents to the opportunity for some welfare support, and that would include making devices available. So if any counsellors or parents do have some anxieties, in the first instance we'd ask them to make themselves known to school, because we are trying to get some real detailed information so we can see what the scale is, and what we might be able to do. And you're right, there's some opportunities maybe regionally, and we want to be able to explore those fully, but we want to be able to understand the scale of that. So does that help answer everybody's questions in that respect?
It does. What about the colleges and universities, as I've mentioned?
Yeah, in terms of colleges and
right. Yeah,
sorry.
no, that's fine. We'll structure that. Yeah, if I bring, because we've got Paul White's question on staff support, Amanda. So I'll come back to the stuff on schools and colleges. Is that okay? Have you got any other questions on the digital stuff, Amanda?
No, that's fine.
No, that's fine.
Thank you,
Paul.
So in terms of, you're absolutely right, Councillor White. Obviously, there's been a lot of focus in the conversation so far about families, youngsters, but our school staff, teaching staff, support staff, that is definitely some of the key feedback that we've received, that actually this is very tiring, because part of being able to maintain those bubbles in varying forms does require some continuity of adults, I suppose. And yes, there's an additional ask on how do you support youngsters who are having to be at home, and we absolutely need to look after our adults in school. We've had a real focus. We've got a really brilliant offer to schools from our employee healthcare, that it's exceptional. Certainly we've been engaging with our trade union colleagues, and we'll continue to engage with trade union colleagues who will also give us feedback in that respect, and how best we can support individuals and workload and anxieties as well. This is an anxious time for us all, and obviously we've all got families, so that has been very much at the forefront of our planning. We need to be able to listen and review after the first half term. We have had confirmation that there will be half term as usual. It won't be like it was pre the summer holidays. There won't be an expectation that schools stay open for key worker youngsters or vulnerable children. So that's really important. But we do need to keep a weathered eye on that. It's also about how we manage staff absence, because, like I say, if there are a significant number of adults out of school, then that puts more pressure on the adults that are still in school. So that is something we've got a real focus on, and are working closely with our HR team.
Yeah, thanks, John. Is that all right, Paul, with that? Yeah, fine. Yeah, okay. Right, sorry, Amanda, you're just structuring the questions here. And it might want to be a quick answer to this, Joanne, and you might want to come back to us to the November meeting with more details. But I think particularly the college, and I will declare an interest there. I've got a 16-year-old starting at, at Kirklees College this time. There's a number of us got, people sat in the various colleges across Kirklees. So just, if there's a brief indication of how the support we're providing to those areas, and perhaps saying, well, there might be things you can bring back to us in November. And there'll be different issues around the university with the number of students coming back into Kirklees to study at Huddersfield. So yeah.
Sure. So really briefly then, we've got really strong relationships with our post-16 colleges and our school sixth form settings. Yes, I'd love to bring a more detailed update. They're figured in all our planning. It is different and unique for them because it's just a different setup, and they've been working really collaborative with us. There has been similar exercises as well with the university about that collaboration, that business continuity planning. So yes, we have been engaging. We've been working in partnership and sharing best practice, and some of the learning we've been sharing across year groups as well. So yes, very much working in collaboration and partnership, and we've really valued that relationship.
Good.
Thank
Is that
you.
right, Amanda? And we do
Thank
need
you.
to keep, obviously affecting thousands of young people across the borough, so we need to think about that. Okay, right, Yusra, I'll bring you in. You got a question for Joanne?
Yes, I have. Thank you.
Thank you. That's right.
Thank you, Joanne, for all the information there. My question is around something that you've picked up. Obviously, there is going to be a high risk of unemployment for adults, and it's really good to hear that you're looking at preventative measures. Can I just ask about the stats around that? Do we actually know which parents are potentially at risk of losing employment, and what support we could put in place for those parents before they reach that point?
Okay.
And their children.
I'm not sure I've got that information at my fingertips, but definitely the thing that we've been keeping a close eye on, and perhaps we can bring that back future scrutiny, is we've been monitoring, I suppose, eligibility for free school meals, and that's one indicator. But I think there'd be an opportunity to bring that back with some details, so you could see how that has changed, I suppose, since lockdown. It's something that's been a real focus for us about parental sustainability.
Yeah, I'm just very conscious that obviously there's some parents have gone back to education, higher education particularly, and I think there's going to be a 40 to potentially 50% drop in employment, so they might not end up in the graduate jobs that they went in to train for, and it's their children that may be at high risk of not getting access to things. So that's something that'd be really good if you could look into that for us. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll take that back. Thank you, Councillor Hussain.
Yeah, I think in that respect, it's the impact of family income on educational outcomes, which is the longer term view, and that's going to be particularly brought into focus at the moment. But we need to keep an eye on that over the longer term, and so if we could include that in the longer term programme. So thank you, Yusra, Joanne. Right.
Thank you. Thanks.
Right. Thanks, Joanne, for that update on that, and thank you, panel members, for those questions on that. I think we've got some really detailed answers to that, and some things we're going to be keeping a watching brief on. And again, it's the longer term impacts of COVID on educational outcomes that we're really interested in, and perhaps something particularly regarding digital inclusion and support for families and for staff. There's opportunities to actually do good, opportunities to do things better than we perhaps have done in the past if there's resources to come in that area. So thank you, Joanne. That's great. Right, I'm going to move on now to item 8, which is the report, the regular report on the number of children looked after. And Julie, I think you're going to be leading us on that. All right.
Yep.
Thanks, Julie. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julie Bragg. I am the Head of Corporate Parenting. I have responsibility for the children in care, the care leavers and the fostering services. My report is to provide you with an update in relation to the numbers and profile of our children in care and the numbers that are children that are placed outside of the district. As you can see from my report, at the end of August 2020, we had 689 children in the care of the local authority. What we did see at the initial stages of lockdown was we had a slight increase in these numbers. However, as you can see from the figures, during the last 3 months, we have maintained that stability and not seen a spike or an increase in the numbers. Throughout the period of time during the lockdown period, and as we all know, we've all been working very, very differently, but throughout the period of time, we have maintained our legal gateway panel and our permanence panel, which is the arena where senior managers have oversight to ensure that the children that are coming to the care of the local authority, that is the right care plan for them. We've continued virtually with these panels and still do to date, so that oversight has continued throughout. What we have seen during the last 4 weeks, and in particular since children have gone back into school, we have seen an increase in the numbers of the referrals coming into the front doors. So what we will be doing is closely monitoring in terms of that impact in terms of the children and the numbers of children coming into care. As you can see from the group, the largest number of for both boys and girls in the age range for children in the care of the local authorities is between the ages of 10 to 15. And then the lowest number of children, again for both boys and girls, are children under the ages of 1. In relation to the ethnicity, 75% of those children in care are of white British ethnicity. One of the key facts, one of the key areas of work that we have been really focused on since our Ofsted inspection has been how we monitor and how we ensure that the children that are in the care of the local authority remain within the Kirklees boundary, and that has been, I'm pleased to say, a decreasing picture over a period of time, and are currently standing at 11.8%. I think that does reflect some of the work that's been happening in the service in terms of how we've improved and have a much more robust care planning process in place. In terms of the children who are 16 plus and placed in semi-independent accommodation, as of August, we had 32 young people in semi-independent accommodation. Out of 32, 20 of these are placed within the Kirklees area. And as of the other 12, 10 children are placed closely to Kirklees in the Calderdale, the Leeds and the Bradford areas, and the two young people that are actually more than 20 miles away from Kirklees. There are good reasons for that. For one particular young person, that has been a decision that's been based on safety and needing to be not in the Kirklees area. And for the other young person, that young person has chosen to stay. It's his wishes and feelings that he remains living in the area where he's been for a few years now. What I would just in terms of, I know people are interested in some of the impact of children in care and what that meant from COVID. I think probably one of the biggest impacts we've had is placement breakdowns. We have seen an increase in the numbers of children where we've had placement breakdowns. We've had various services and support around extra support for our carers, our residential staff in order to prevent placement breakdown. We've also had continued to provide a support from the placement support services, maintained our stability meetings to look at how we can prevent this happening. And I think in terms of my report, I think that's the detail. So, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions through yourself. If thank
you, Julie. Yeah, I will. Open it to panel members for questions. Just to start off with. Notice that we've stabilised at a new higher level of number of children looked after, so it's gone up from about 640 last year up to 689. Just seems to be a bit of a dip in May, so April it went up to 681, May down to 677, now back up to 689, which is a new. You just want to, what's happening in that sort of that time frame?
As I say, sometimes it's really difficult to actually be very, very specific about what happens at a particular time. Often it is just around a child's circumstances. If we have a particular referral where, we have to, an emergency crisis times, council management is often different, just to be able to say it is because of this reason. If we need to have more detail, and we can certainly look at the data behind the figures if it will be helpful.
Yes, please. Thank you. Yeah, okay. Thanks for that, Julie. Paul Davis.
Okay. Just taking you back, Julie, to the comments around children, young people placed more than 20 miles outside of Kirklees. I think you referred to an improving situation, and I think historically, I think that might be right. But if we're looking at the numbers and the report, certainly since June, that's been static. It's around about the 12%. Just would like to sort of understand what the thoughts are in terms of how we could reduce that, or it may well be that that is the number because there are various reasons which mean that it can come down significantly. But really, just trying to understand what room we've got for improvement with that.
Fine. So we've got lots of work going on within our fostering service at the moment, and where we're looking at improvements of how we can firstly recruit more foster carers locally. We have just recently introduced and just launched, because obviously one of the sorry, Tom, do you want to come in? We just recently launched, we had to be really innovative in terms of thinking about the last few months and the impact that has had on being able, our advertisement campaign, because we've certainly in the past used venues like Huddersfield Town where we've been able to advertise for foster carers. So we've had to be quite creative in thinking about different ways of how we do that. We have basically just recently this week, over the last couple of weeks, we've introduced a fantastic advertising campaign, and I'm sure roundabout in Kirklees, as you look at our excuse me, I've got a bit of a tickle, bin lorries, you'll see that we've got lots and lots of fantastic adverts on our bin lorries that look brilliant. We've also our housing colleagues have also put adverts out onto their vans as well. We've been quite innovative in looking at the situation for some people that are looking at alternative careers, looking at alternative employment, and we at this moment in time have a in partnership with Radio Pulse. We've got some advertising happening with them as well. We've maintained through Google Ads all different ways of actually how we can improve our situation. What has been really positive is that early on at the beginning of lockdown, we looked at a number of emergency foster carers who came forward and said they would like to be able to provide emergency placements for our children in Kirklees, local people within the Kirklees areas from various backgrounds. And initially those were Regulation 24 assessments, and I'm pleased to say that a number of those carers now are now going through a full fostering assessment. So we've had an increase in there in terms of being able to provide more local provision.
Okay.
Can I bring Tom and then Mel in? Tom Brailsford, do you want to, and then Mel Meggs, if you want to get ready to, if you want to respond.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Martin. Tom Brailsford, Service Director for Resources Improvement and Partnerships. Yeah, Councillor Davis, just to pick up on what Julie's saying, I mean, obviously, we've been doing a lot of work throughout the COVID period, in terms of making sure that there's enough sufficiency in the system to make sure there's enough placements for our children and young people, both foster and residential. And obviously the COVID situation has made that more challenging. I think part of what we'd say is that, our ambition is always to have children and young people where possible, as local as possible. And as part of that, we're developing a sufficiency needs assessment and plan to address that. And that will encompass a lot of what Julie's talked about, which is about looking at our fostering provision, the way we recruit, how we retain foster carers, and the skill mix we've got to enable to keep children and young people locally. But at the same time, the capital programme that we're currently undertaking is looking at, we're currently in the process of buying a new children's home, which will be our multi-systemic therapy home, which will help with that. We're also looking at repurposing and rebuilding 2 of our children with a disability homes to be able to meet more need locally, and also joining that up with our special educational needs provision, social, emotional, and mental health provision, so that actually on the occasions where children do have to go out of area due to education, we can join that up and keep more children locally. And I think it would probably be useful for us to bring into view a future scrutiny panel those plans and how we think that would impact on the number of children who are placed out of area, if that's helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Tom.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think Mel, you wanted to.
Thank you. Just to sort of build on Tom's point, really, I think that obviously we are just refreshing our sufficiency assessment and more than happy to bring that to scrutiny to have a look at. when we're ready. I think we can't underestimate the impact of COVID has had around placement stagnancy. So, you know, we haven't had as many children leaving. So some of our numbers will be about those children that we may have had plans to either return them to their family and others and haven't been able to achieve that. So I think that some of the sustained numbers at a bit of a higher level will definitely incorporate children in those situations. And I think in terms of the how quickly, I think the question was, will we be able to return those children who remain outside of Kirklees home? I think we will see that down slowly, because it has to be in the child's best interest that we move the placement. So if a child has a strong bond in a family, and as you can see, most of them are in foster placements, if they've got a strong bond in that family, if that placement is going well, regardless of where that is, we would leave the child there unless, but obviously if there was an opportunity because the placement isn't going well, then that would be the time that we would think about bringing that child back. So we will expect to see a small decreasing trend, but it will be over a longer period of time, because no one wants to move children and lose the sort of family connections that we have and the attachments that they have with the foster family arrangements that they've got, to move them into a family that might, just because it's closer doesn't always mean it's better. And I think there's something about that. So I think we will see it as a declining trend, maybe in life post-COVID. But I think it will take us some time to get to that place. And I think it may be useful, Julie, to have a look at the data about how we're placing new children coming in now versus those children that have been in care for a long time. Because what you've got is the data of children that will include some of them that have been with us since they were babies. And they might be 10 or 11 years old now. Of course, if they've been living with the same family for that period of time, there's absolutely no way that we're going to want to move them. What we have to do is make efforts to make sure that they are visible to us, that we know that they're safe and being well cared for, and that they're getting the right outcomes for those children. But actually, you know, having and maybe monitoring those new ones coming in. And are we able to find local placements for new children that are coming into care might be a more useful statistic to show you how the system's changed.
Yep. Well, thanks everybody for responding. And Mel, your last comments. I think that's indeed a very good idea. I think that certainly gives us a better view of what's happening and how we're going forward. Because as you say, we don't want to be, you know, dragging children out of places where they're stable and they're happy. But thank you very much. And also, as Tom said, it'd be very interesting not just to see that, but the wider view on the sufficiency as well. Thanks.
Yeah. That's great. Right, I'm just going to do a bit of reset now, because Paul, you still got a hand up. Amanda, you still got a hand up. Are you wanted to ask questions on this item, or?
Yeah, very
Amanda.
quick.
Yeah, that's fine, Amanda. I'll bring you in then. Yeah, that's fine.
So basically, because, you know, parts of the report is broken down into ethnicity, I wanted to ask about BAME fosterers and how you're getting on with targeting BAME fosterers, and whether I could provide you with any assistance, because I work with a number of BAME groups that I think might be interested in supporting any work that you're trying to do.
Firstly, what I'd say, Amanda, is that would be extremely helpful, and absolutely. And if you could email me, I will willingly have that conversation with you, because any ideas be extremely welcome. We have done some targeted recruitment in the past, and we'll continue to do targeted recruitment again. And I'm smiling because I'm so happy you said this to me, that to give us some ideas that actually, because again of COVID and some of the issues that we've had around that, and having to rethink things, how we do things, how we can do things differently, I certainly would, you know, welcome. I will. Email me, that's what I will say, but yes, of how we can improve in that area. Thank you.
So I don't know if I know Tom and Mel both put their videos up. I don't know if is that an endorsement of that. That's fine. Thanks. Yeah, and
it was just to say, you know, more than welcome. And it's also worth saying that one of the things we're doing at the moment is looking at really creative ways of trying to engage foster carers, and particularly around trying to capitalise on some of the negatives about people who have become unemployed, and actually seeing that there are some other opportunities for them. So I think bringing that in the round as well in terms of how we work with wider groups. You know, any support would be more than welcome.
Yeah, Mel,
Yeah, I just wanted to take the opportunity before Councillor Kendrick does to remind you all of her call to elected members. I think probably about this time last year really was can all elected members try and at least get one referral of someone to be considered as a foster carer for us. So I think Councillor that offer is amazing, and I will no doubt Councillor Kendrick remind her colleagues of our joint commitment in a sense to raise the profile of fostering, and where we do see groups, please do. I have a whole pack of in the days when we were in the office, I've got a whole pack of fostering applications and paperwork that we routinely give out to people in my travels, and it might be useful perhaps for elected members to have at least one pack each, so that you can see that, and if you do come across somebody, you're able to give them some of that basic information. And I think maybe if we started with scrutiny and corporate parenting members and then and rolled that out, I think it would just remind elected members of their commitment to Councillor Kendrick.
Yeah, Viv.
Just absolutely happy that Mel gave me the advert. I've asked in council twice. I will take every opportunity to remind colleagues that this is a really important thing that they can contribute to. Thank you.
Yeah. Elaine?
Good afternoon, I'm Elaine McShane. I'm the Service Director for Family Support and Child Protection, usually the person that makes the final decision about children coming into care and where they're placed. I think what's really important to say that actually over the past few months we have placed very few children or young people out of the area in children's homes. We may have done that in a fostering setting, but not in children's homes. And I think that's really important, because what I'd want, and I'm sure Tom at some point will bring back, our children's homes have gone over and above over the past few months in terms of supporting the children that live within their settings. And I would say in particular, 2 young people that might have actually gone quite distanced from Kirklees have been able to remain and actually really made good progress over the last few months despite many challenges, and I'd really want to estimate the amount of commitment from our children's homes practitioners of what they've done to ensure that happens. It's just fabulous, really.
Yeah, great. Thanks for those responses, and thanks for that offer, Amanda. I think that's certainly going back through Corporate Parenting Board to and encouraging anybody from who's wanted to look at fostering and adoption to really encourage that. That would be great. So thanks for that offer, Amanda. Thanks for those comments. Right, fine. So panel members, any other questions or comments on the report on children looked after? Fine. Yeah. Is that no? Fine. Right. We're just going to get. So Mel, I think your hand's still up. If you want to just. You take that. Are you wanting to come in, or are you wanting to? That's fine. That's fine. Just clear that, and we'll just reset. So thank you, Julie, for leading on report. Thank you, panel members, for your questions, and thanks for Tom and Mel and Elaine for those other contributions. So thank you, Julie, for that.
Thank you.
That report. That's great. Thanks. Okay. Right. Right, Michelle, do you want to stand ready? We're on to item 9 now, which is a report on early years. And I should get me the correct title of the report. Item 9, early years and beyond. So I think you're going to be starting us off on that. So that's great. Michelle, good afternoon. Welcome to the meeting.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Michelle Wheatcroft. I'm the Head of Service for Early Support. Can I just take the opportunity before we start to introduce Jackie as well, who's going to present some of the reports as well?
Hi, I'm Jackie Beaver, Service Manager for Early Support and with the lead for Family Hubs.
Yeah, morning, afternoon, Jackie. Welcome to the meeting. All
right. So we're bringing the report to scrutiny today as a follow-up from the Early Years and Beyond Summit that was held back in January now. It's an opportunity for us to discuss and also what the next steps are, which includes a proposal to develop and implement an integrated 0-19 25 early support offer, which we are proposing that we call Family Hubs. So I've just said myself and Jackie are going to present the report, but I'll start with the summary, and then Jackie will go into sort of further details on the work that she's done around the Family Hubs proposal. So I've just said the Early Years and Beyond Summit was held on the 29th of January, with approximately around about 100 attendees, which were from external and internal stakeholders. So the aim of the event was to engage with partners to contribute to the shaping of 0-19 integrated service for early support for the children and families of Kirklees. Mel opened the event, and she spoke about sort of what the importance was of investing in early years and the future impacts on society. There were a number of other presentations, which included one from Brid Featherston from Huddersfield University, and she also talked about the importance of investing in early support. We had presentations from the Be Best Community Hub, who talked about their school readiness project, and then with Local Services to You, which is mainly based in sort of the Ashbrow area, which spoke about a project that they have ongoing about joining local communities and to those sort of wider systems. In the afternoon, we presented a draft version of a hub-to-hub model, which I understand is attached to your report today, and then that formed the basis for some conversations around looking at sort of what the opportunities were, any risks, and sort of the next steps. So I suppose the event ended with partners committing to pledges, and we had quite a high number of pledges at the end of the day, and that was to support the model going forward. So that was both from organisations and from individuals. So you're probably aware that early in 2019 that we commissioned a review of early support, and that was done by a company called People 2. There was a number of recommendations from that, and one of the recommendations was to bring some additional capacity into the early support service in terms of management capacity. That resulted in 3 service managers being recruited, with a lead for youth, a lead for family support, and obviously Jackie leading on the Children's Centres Community Hubs offer. We managed to get those people in post by the 23rd of March, which was probably quite a memorable day for many of us. But what that did do was enable us to add some capacity to the service, and we've been able to develop the early support service now over the past 6 months with some pace, which has included the family hub offer, which is where Jackie comes in, and I'm going to pass over to Jackie now to tell you more about the work that she has done. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, so I've been sort of working on proposals around the family hub model. The model itself builds on the principles of the community hubs and the direction of travel around children's centres and the core offer. I think, as Michelle's alluded to there, early support is evolving. And in terms of the proposals, it's around the place-based approach to supporting families at the earliest opportunity, when and where they need that help locally. The proposed model is based around 4 geographical areas that have 4 children's centres buildings in them, those being Birstall, Dewsbury Moor, Slough Town Hall and Chestnut in Ashbrow. However, the model is not about buildings and not about us expecting families to come to those buildings. The model is about that place-based approach and about having the offer available locally, and that could be delivered through a number of avenues: buildings, community buildings, schools, GP surgeries, outdoors in community for play, etc. It builds on community assets and strengths that are already out there. I think, again, as Michelle's alluded to, as well as family support, we've had growth in detached youth and play. Duke of Edinburgh has come into early support. mental health in families team, early years family group conferencing and parenting, with a community offer around the community coordinators and the community hubs. I think we know that research suggests that early support can protect children from harm, and by investing in that early support, you know, the evidence suggests that you reduce that need for higher end services. We're hoping that the family hubs are the place to go, so places to go for families with children 0 to 19 and up to 25 if that young person has a disability. They're very reliant on strong partnerships. And the areas of success within the model will be measured by using outcomes, and hopefully that is through close collaboration between stakeholders to help to share and develop an outcomes framework around the model. The next steps are for our cabinet, and we are hoping to go through a process of engagement activity with quite a robust engagement plan in place, which involves engaging out in communities, with various organisations, with public, with staff. And I'll open it up to questions there if anybody wants to ask anything further about the proposals.
Thank you, Jackie, for that. Panel members, questions? Paul Davis? Question?
Yeah, I think this is great news. I absolutely agree. This early intervention, this ability to provide this support as early as possible is crucial. I think the idea of the family hubs is exactly the right approach. I guess for me, what it's about, you know, making it happen on the ground as well. And I know that you're talking about the consultation is going to take place. I think we've got a great example of where the council linked through to communities and built on community resilience and support, and that was during the lockdown. You know, where what we achieved there, I think, in partnership and collaboration was fantastic. So I would really, you know, emphasize that we should, you know, learn from that, utilize the lessons from that, utilize the linkages from that, particularly around community anchors, support groups that we have. I think my only worry with initiatives like this is sometimes we have a fantastic vision, we have a great intent, but then this actual connection at the grassroots is always difficult. So I think there's let's not lose the opportunity, if you like, where we already have much of that in place now, and let's build on that. But I think it's something that definitely we need, and I'm really pleased to hear that this is going forward. Thank you.
Thanks for that comment, Paul. That's great. Good. That's great. I've got a couple of specific questions, Jackie, if that's all right. Again, fully support the model and build on what Paul said about it's been a really good thing about building community models. The specifics of working with early years, specific interventions, specific things that are going on that are likely to reduce the risk of a child becoming looked after later on. Are you picking some of that up? What works really well? How can we track that?
Well, I think the whole thinking behind the model is we want to work with families or parents as soon as they know they are going to become a parent. So it's integral that we are working very closely with services from midwifery right through, and those earliest years in terms of the best start in life are absolutely crucial to those longer term outcomes. So integral to this model is there are the interventions that we can support, but I think there's some work to be done around assessing what is already happening out there, what is already on offer, and looking at what we need to develop further. We're already in discussion with midwifery around midwifery hubs. We're already in discussion with health. We're also in discussions around Thriving Kirklees. So absolutely, early years is integral and highly important to us in terms of the model. I don't know if Michelle, if you want to come in with any of the actual particular interventions that we're delivering on at the moment.
Yeah, I think some of the interventions we're delivering on at the moment is we've got sort of the Making It Real programme, which is a programme across settings and schools. We're also using a launchpad for literacy in some schools as well. And I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, we've got one of the community hubs that's delivering a school readiness project, and that's been quite successful. Rolled out across the other hubs and as well. I think we have Jackie mentioned sort of the early years outcomes team as well, which are working very closely with settings and have continued to do so during the COVID response. So I think there's lots more opportunities and building more sort of more partnerships as well in developing the family hub model.
And sorry, can I just come back in there as well? And in addition, obviously there are the public health outcomes, and some of the health outcomes are related to early years. And again, the outcomes framework, some of that would be factored in terms of us working towards achieving, and certainly the school readiness agenda.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie, for both of those. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it is looking at things that really do work. The other question I've got is, I'm really pleased you said, Jackie, it's not just about the buildings, those 4 buildings or the 4 across the borough, but it's about the actions that are taking place. And it's again the things that we're learning, which all parents will benefit from in terms of better outcomes for all children across the borough. So particularly like what you said around midwifery services, I don't know if there's anything we're still doing with health visitors, whether that's sort of about picking up things then, and then all parents will benefit from those really positive interventions. But if you're picking up a particular extra need through that, it benefits particular families and perhaps in particular areas as well. So yeah. So it's working. Yeah, every parent, new parent or new family will have access to these services that are available. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, fine. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so that's great. And I just the real long-term thinking here is we're hoping that not just these interventions are going to reduce the risk of children being looked after, but better educational outcomes. So we might see, in 15, 16, 20 years time, that some of the work you're doing now is going to be. We'll hope. No, that's me making it. Yeah, it might be GCSEs, it might be A levels, it might be something totally different by then. But laying those really good foundations, it's long term, isn't it? So, I don't know if panel members have got any other questions on that. No, can I just say a really big thank you, Jackie, for the work you're doing and your report, Michelle, and the work you're doing. I know I very early on when I went into post, I think it's probably 18 months ago now. 12 months ago, I was at one of your early intervention and prevention conferences down at events down at the Textile Centre, and I found that a really positive experience, and it sounds like the one that you've had this year is really positive as well. So look forward to keeping looking at what's going on. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. That's great. Right, I think we're coming towards the final item on our agenda, which is our panel work programme. There's not too many updates on that. What is one thing that will be coming? Panel members remember, I think in February we had the report on the ad hoc scrutiny report on elective home education. That we had a overview and scrutiny management committee meeting on that earlier this week. It's now about ready to go to cabinet. Cabinet have accepted all of our the recommendations from that report. I think there's an awareness that there might be some budget implications for some of those interventions, but Cabinet's been very positive about that. And what I've suggested is that actually when we're monitoring how those recommendations are implemented, it will come back to this panel rather than back to our review and scrutiny management committee. That will come on. The other corporate parenting board, there's a piece of work being done on having the specific risk register around corporate parenting and looked after children, which looked to be really interesting. So Vivi, you want to come in on that?
No, I was just going to confirm it was the risk register. I thought you were just stuck.
Go on then. Yeah, just give us a bit of detail on that, Viv, if you want.
It literally is looking at the risk register and the issues around children's services and trying to look behind that and see whether they're appropriate and we feel they're accurate, or other things that could be added in there.
Yeah, and I just like from a scrutiny point of view, it's really interesting to see that piece of work being done by the Corporate Parenting Board, and I don't think we need a formal brief on that, but there's a lot of scrutiny of data going on in a lot of meetings elsewhere. I mean, Paul will be aware of that. Paul Davis, you'll be aware of that through your the schools panel and through Corporate Parenting and Children's Improvement Board. So a lot of that work's coming in, so we can keep an overview of that. So, okay, right. I think at this stage I don't think we're taking additional stuff for the work programme, but we'll just keep an overview of that as the year progresses. So, right, unless there's any other comments or questions from panel members, I think we're drawing to the end of our meeting. So a big thank you for everybody for taking part, all our comments and contributions and questions from both panel members and from officers. Our next meeting of the Children's Scrutiny Panel is on Monday, the 9th of November, and the meeting in public will start at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So Monday the 9th of November at 2 o'clock. Thank you everybody for your participation this afternoon. I think we're ready to end the meeting.
Cheers.